It's working. It's working.
Okay, I see that we are now streaming on YouTube, which is wonderful. Welcome everyone to the Upper West Side Coalition of Block Associations and Community Groups. We are obviously waiting for people to join us on YouTube. Everyone to the Upper West Side Coalition. Who's ever got their audio from YouTube on needs to turn that off so we can be okay with that. It is wonderful that so many people are joining us. I see many are waiting. My name's Steve Anderson from the West 81st Street Block Association. I serve as the coalition president this year. And we are just about to start our forum focusing upon sanitation on the Upper West Side. But if you are interested in starting a block association, please be in touch with us as we want to help. If you need some help running your group, let us know. And if you just want to know a little more about our activities, please check out our website, upperwestsidecoalition.org, or email us at upperwestsidecoalition@gmail.com. And both of those should be in your chat windows. We are all about block associations and community groups serving the Upper West Side. Our subject this evening is sanitation. And when we asked residents if they had any questions for the sanitation department, the response has proven unlike ever before. And we've heard from more Upper West Siders.
We'll give it another 2 minutes before we start the meeting. See who else joins us.
I'm not sure what that noise is. And there's several people who have asked about many questions, and we now have more than 100 questions posed. Now, we're obviously not going to have the sanitation commissioner and our guest answer all those questions, but we are going to ask the sanitation department to receive from us a copy of all the questions that we have received so that they can be answered, the ones that have not been answered during the forum at a later time, and we will ask them. I'm joined by two great neighbors from 75th Street, Liz DeVito, who serves as the coalition board member and is key in making these programs happen. And she'll be sharing many questions that you've asked us to pose. And also Dee Reber, who's the editor of our newsletter, and will be monitoring the YouTube chat for those questions. Special appreciation to one of those remarkable Upper West Side citizens, Mark Diller, CB7 member, former chair, 79th Street Block Association member, and the technology wizard for the coalition. These sessions don't happen without the efforts of these three dedicated folks. Now to our guest, and we are most appreciative to have with us the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Sanitation, Jessica Tisch, and we hopefully will be very short. Oh, there he is. I wanted to make sure you were on. By Ryan Dempsey is joining us, the Deputy Chief of Sanitation for Manhattan. It is very clear this is a topic of the greatest concern to so many of us who live on the Upper West Side. And we are urgently asking you, those of you who are in charge, about these many serious issues, and to provide us the information on how you intend to solve the varied sanitation problems that we see around us. To begin, Commissioner, welcome. Thank you for being here. Please share with us your review, what you see as the status of sanitation on the Upper West Side today. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me, and hello to everyone joining us both on the Zoom and on YouTube. I am really thrilled to be here to have this conversation with you. And I just want to echo the commitment that whatever is not answered today will be followed up on and answered and provided in writing to Steve for distribution. I find it incredibly useful to talk to local community groups, just to hear from residents the specific concerns about specific neighborhoods. This is something that we're doing more and more of, just because every neighborhood across the city is different, and every neighborhood has different challenges. some neighborhoods suffer significantly from the blight of illegal dumping. Others have issues around litter basket service. And so it's very important for us to hear directly from you what the issues are in your community. That said, I do have some ideas about what the issues are in our communities and in your community. And that data really comes to me and to us in the department through a few main sources, but I'll just highlight two of them. The first is obviously through 311 complaints. And I have a background in IT and data management. I spent a lot of my career doing that. So I'm definitely a very data-driven person. So the 311 complaints, while they certainly don't represent the entire universe of issues, or the entire universe of complaints or issues in a neighborhood, they generally serve as a pretty good indication of what the top issues are and where they're being seen. And the other main, or another main source of information that I get in headquarters comes from our garage, our M7 garage, and our Manhattan borough that I know works very closely with the community and is always out and about in the field, observing conditions and responding as appropriate. Today, I want to hit a few main topics, and I'll try to keep my remarks very on the briefer end so that we can get to questions. And I'm sure like a lot of the issues will come out in the Q&A, but I definitely want to talk about litter basket service. I took over sanitation in April of this year, so about 5 months ago. And I said at the time that I thought that the city was absolutely filthy, and that much of that I attributed to what I have called a complete decimation of the funding in the sanitation department associated with our cleaning function, as opposed to, for example, our collection function or our snow plowing function at the beginning of the pandemic. So in like April of 2020, the sanitation department was largely defunded from the cleanliness business. That means that our litter basket service, the number of trucks that we were allowed to run to service litter baskets, was basically halved. Alternate side of the street parking and our mechanical brooms were also halved on the Upper West Side. And those two things, I believe, made a very meaningful difference in the quality and the cleanliness of the streets in many neighborhoods, in particular on the Upper West Side. I am very pleased to tell you that effective July 1st, a few things changed. First, the city council and the mayor made an unprecedented investment in litter basket service citywide, but in particular, the Upper West Side has benefited from it. We've seen almost a 50% increase in the amount of service that we are able to provide to litter baskets on the Upper West Side every day, including on Sundays. And anecdotally, what I will say is that the number of 311 complaints associated with overflowing litter baskets, specifically on the Upper West Side, since July 1st, tell that story. So they're down by 60% in M7 since the additional service kicked in on July 1st. Now, I'm not aiming for 60%. I'm aiming for a much higher percent. So I by no means want to sound complacent, but I am encouraged by some of the very preliminary data that we are seeing around our increased litter basket service. The other thing that I want to address in my remarks before I open it up to questions, of course, is our street sweeping and our mechanical brooms. If any of you have heard me speak before, I say this quite often. The mechanical brooms are for sure the best street cleaning tool that we have in our arsenal. I know it is an absolute pain to move the cars, and in particular neighborhoods, we have to move them now twice a week. But I fundamentally believe that it was absolutely necessary to restore full street sweeping and full mechanical broom service, and that this additional service is greatly impacting for the better the cleanliness and the quality of our curb lines citywide, but in particular our curb lines on the Upper West Side. One thing that we've done of late is when I've seen a number of complaints starting in basically when the conversation about restoring full alternate side parking came up in early July, and a number of complaints. Well, you know, I moved my car and the broom never comes. And so I want to tell you all that one thing that we've done is we've put GPS in our mechanical brooms. Because if we're asking New Yorkers to move their cars, then those brooms better come there and they better sweep the streets, because otherwise we shouldn't be asking for it. And now that we have the GPS in the brooms, first as a management tool for me, but ultimately I do plan to make it a transparency tool so that New Yorkers can see where the brooms are and where they've been, when they were last, each block was last serviced. But what I have seen since we've put the GPS data in the brooms is a significant increase in the completion of our routes on the Upper West Side. I've added a broom on the Upper West Side and rejiggered the routes to ensure faster completion and more completion of the routes. And that is something that we are absolutely committed to doing. And then the final thing I'll say before questions is one thing I've talked openly about that I'm very interested in, but hasn't been done yet, is I'm interested in rethinking the amount of time that trash bags spend on the streets in New York City. So today, the set out time for trash in New York City, citywide, is 4 p.m. on the residential side. On the commercial side, it's an hour before closing. Who knows what time closing is, you know, the stores like basically put it out whenever. And then when questioned, they're like, oh yeah, we're closing in an hour. But what that means is on the residential side, which is sort of a cleaner example, is that the bags spend more time on the curb than they do not on the curb. So if they're set out at 4 and they're not collected until 6 a.m. the next morning, that's 14 hours out on the curb. Those bags serve as all you can eat buffet for rats. And they're also gross to walk by PM rush hour and rush hour. So I'm very interested in both revising the set out times, making the time trash can be set out later in the day. We've been toying with pretty openly changing it to 6 p.m. if you want to set it out in your own container, 8 p.m. if you want to put the black bags on the curb. And then on the commercial side, it would be an hour before closing in a container, and no black bags on the curb until 8 p.m. Sort of standardizing that 8 p.m. rule between residential and commercial. This will make it much easier for us to enforce once we have the standardization, particularly on the commercial side. And you know, we're looking at different options. That's one option that has been floated. But the other important piece is making our collection earlier so that the bags sit on the street for less time. We want to ask New Yorkers to put them out later, and we want to collect them earlier. To date, since I've started, we have increased 25% the amount of collection we're doing on the midnight shift, as opposed to the 6 a.m. shift. And so I just wanted everyone here to know that I am very deeply and seriously thinking through different strategies for how to get those black bags off the street, or really to minimize the amount of time that they spend on the street. We don't have alleys like Chicago does. But this is definitely a place where many other cities have innovated over the past decade, and New York City hasn't. And in my opinion, it is a very important place for us to sort of innovate and to think out of the New York City box because all the bags on the street are a main source of the ick factor. Oftentimes, people will see a bunch of black bags on the street and they'll just like throw their coffee cup on top of it because they're like, oh, this is coming to be collected anyway, which also creates litter conditions around the black bags. All right, I think I've spoken too much. I apologize. I am more than happy to answer any of your questions you have on this.
Good. Thank you very much.
Addressed or any others.
I think we have a lot of ick factor questions here. We're going to start with members of the coalition, then move on to those that have been submitted. Melissa, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much. Great to be here. Lovely to meet you, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner. So my question will not be one of those ick questions. You will definitely be getting those more about the rats and the garbage, etc. Composting, though I don't think that's so icky. But I'd like to go to the source of the problem. Why is it that we still in 2022 are creating so much of the trash, so much waste? Why are we not a more circular economy, a zero waste economy? How can we change, whether through legislation, education, PSAs, etc.? We have a skip the stuff bill at the City Council Intro 559. Where does the DSNY stand on that bill? Have you been advocating for its passage to reduce single-use plastic pollution, which we know contributes to climate change and the continued increase of fossil fuel drilling? And then maybe as well, people don't realize when they throw what could be recycled into the litter baskets that you described, the curbside receptacles, that just goes to landfill. There's no one sorting. And people don't realize that, though they may have good intentions, even though I do believe that a single-use plastic water bottle could be replaced by, something like this, etc. So how can we really change? It's time to change the mindset. There is no a way when we throw things away. So that's my big question.
If I could ask also the responses, I know these are complex issues, but brevity is important so that we can get to more topics. Commissioner?
Yeah, I think this department has a long history of looking for ways to effectively limit the use of plastic. I mean, you have the plastic bag ban, the straw bill. We are definitely supportive of skip the stuff. I think there is a lot of alignment between the vision that you outlined and the department's position on many of these things. I will note that we are doing a waste characterization study right now so that we can quantify how much of metal, glass, plastic, what type of plastic is in the waste stream. And oftentimes, I think better data will inform better policy making. So we're really looking forward to the results of that study. I think that should answer all of the questions. Oh, we can't hear you, Steve.
Thank you very much. Neil, did you have a question?
I did. So thank you for being here this evening, Commissioner. You may recall our conversations on the night out in the park that led to your appearance. I'm grateful that you accepted our invitation. So you spoke pretty eloquently about my two areas of concern about the litter baskets. So I'm so happy to hear, I'm sure we all are, that the Department of Sanitation has committed to an investment strategy to add more receptacles. I must tell you, however, by personal observation, that if anything, since July, the number of receptacles on our corners on the major boulevards, Riverside Drive, West End Avenue, Broadway, Amsterdam, have actually declined during that period. They have not increased, and there's a resultant filth associated with that declination. With respect to your comments about the bags and the length of time they remain on the streets and a shortened period, that will be the case and will be collected during the night shift as well as during the day shift. That's also happy news to hear. I am aware that you've experimented with some prototype receptacles in different sections of Manhattan based on some of the stuff they've done in Europe. where these bags will reside in, next to residential buildings on curbs in sort of semi-permanent receptacle bins. Can you tell us any more about that?
You are muted, Commissioner.
I'm sorry, there seems to be a parade marching down the block on Worth Street, and I'm on Worth Street, so I tried to go on mute. I apologize. Let me start with litter baskets and the number of litter baskets, as you said. I am very open to increasing the number of litter baskets in citywide. Historically, it's been at about 23,000. I know the department has been quite resistant in the past to increasing the number of litter baskets, and I am very open to it. We are collecting data from each community about where they would like to see additional litter baskets placed. I will say that the historical reluctance to increase the number of litter baskets means that you need more trucks to service all the baskets. You want to make sure that you can service them. But I think that New York City, it's not controversial to say that New York City needs more litter baskets in many of our communities, and I'm very open to that. Your question about containerization, as you say, like the receptacles that would be placed in a semi-permanent way on the streets. Containerization is definitely something that we are interested in looking at. And in fact, we have undertaken a real study of it now. In April-ish or May, the department put out a test receptacle, a test container in Times Square. And we've committed to doing at least one pilot of containerization in each borough by the end of the year. And that's well underway. It's very, very limited in scope and scale. But it is very clear to me that to roll anything like containerization like you see in Europe out citywide in New York City will require like real thought and analysis. There are a number of issues, and I'd be happy to have a side conversation about that. I just want you to know that the complexity of that is not lost on me. This is not the type of thing where you're just gonna throw a container, wherever on every block. If we pursue a strategy of containerization, which we're very interested in doing, candidly, it is definitely something that we will have to and are committed to studying deeply and being very transparent with the public about the results of that study.
All right, thank you. Dale, let's again be brief here because there are many questions, more questions now being posed on the YouTube chat. And again, I want to state that the commissioner has assured us that sanitation will answer every one of the questions that have been posed, either sent in by email or on the chats following this if they are not answered during the forum. Dale, did you have a question, please?
Yes, I do. Commissioner, thank you very much for joining with us tonight. I'm Dale Brown. I'm a vice president with the Upper West Side Coalition and president of the West 79th Street Block Association. The city is plagued with trash, rats, roaches, and water bugs. Here on the Upper West Side, we have a very dangerous and disgusting problem with trash in and around the Theodore Roosevelt Park, our national monument, the American Museum of Natural History, the planetarium, and the Broadway Mall benches. Garbage not only overflows from the few cans that we have, food wrappers, discarded food and drinks are being put on the sidewalks, around the trash cans, on and under the benches, around the museum and the Broadway Mall benches. The trash cans, especially on the weekends, are filled by 11 a.m. None of the cans are being emptied in a timely fashion or even emptied at all. The trash on and under the benches are not being removed. What is the Department of Sanitation doing about this?
Well, I hear the feedback. I agree with the general premise that there is a lot of litter on the streets of New York City and appreciate the direct feedback about the locations where you see the biggest problems. We have litter teams that go out and address highly problematic locations, and I have taken note, and I'm sure the chief has as well, of the locations that you have called out, and you can be sure that the litter teams will be there. I reject one piece of what you said, which is that the litter baskets aren't being serviced. The litter baskets on the Upper West Side are serviced probably 3 times a day. Most of them, some of them more, along commercial corridors. So I think all of the strategies that we're putting forward, both with the increased litter basket service, the alternate side parking, the mobile litter control teams that we have, I think those are beginning to make a dent. I appreciate that you are not seeing enough of a dent, but this is, I mean, these are all issues that the department is putting unprecedented amounts of resources against. I would say that the job of keeping communities clean does not just rest on the Department of Sanitation. There is an important role for the public, and in particular for businesses, to play. I mean, businesses have to sweep 18 inches into the curb. Property owners have to do it. The Department of Sanitation is 7,000 people. There is no way for a department of 7,000 people, or frankly, even if it was doubled, 15,000 people, to clean up after all 9 million New Yorkers litter in the city. And that is why there are like rules and responsibilities of property owners to do very basic things. And on the Upper West Side, like anecdotally, what I see is not enough compliance with the very basic rules around cleanliness. I walk around the Upper West Side, I see trash bags on the street at 2 p.m. There shouldn't be trash bags on the street at 2 p.m. I walk around the Upper West Side, I see litter in front of storefronts. I see litter 18 inches into the curb. And so I don't believe in enforcement for the sake of enforcement, but I do believe in enforcement for the sake of enforcing the very basic rules that the city puts out around cleanliness. And so one thing I can commit to you is that for many of the conditions you are seeing, we will not just address with our litter teams, but we're also going to address through enforcement and making sure that that our partners are doing what they need to do to help us all keep our cities safe.
Commissioner, thank you. You've answered some of the questions that have been sent in also with that response. Liz, can you share a couple of questions that have been submitted from our neighbors?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Hello, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner. I'm Liz DeVito with the West 75th Street Block Association. I'm also on the coalition board. The first question I want to share with you was submitted by Barbara Adler and Natasha Kazmi, who are co-chairs of the Parks and Environment Committee of Community Board 7. So we're getting into a little political arena here. They say District 5 Council member Julie Menon recently announced that she got an increased sanitation funding for her district on the east side. And this increased funding will increase litter basket pickups. It will bring more supplemental services and provide rat mitigation. Why is this upgrade only being initiated there? That's their question. I don't know if it's only being initiated there, but
I got
that's the
that
question.
one.
Okay.
Okay. Every council member is given a pot of discretionary funds that they can allocate for sanitation services. And so the press announcement you are referencing is one where Councilmember Menon said, okay, for my district, I'm going to use my discretionary sanitation funds to fund extra litter basket service. This is a standard thing that every council member does every year. We can find out what the supplemental service was in your district provided by your council member, and we can do that in response to the questions. But usually it's either increased litter basket service, increase in like the amount of cleaning services. There's increased cleaning for illegal dumping in communities where illegal dumping is a problem. There are a number of different things that they can put that.
I mean, Commissioner, you understand you're on the west side now. So we were thinking maybe we need to get some of what the east side seems to be getting. So
Oh, no,
I
got that.
That was how
But
that
it's
came
good
in.
to know, though, about what the council members get.
Right.
You know, that's really helpful because we work very closely with Gail Brewer and Sean Abreu's offices to share our concerns and, you know, that the community has. So that's good to know.
Liz, what else do you have?
Yeah, okay, so there's another one from Mary Krieger, who's on the composting team of an Upper West Side community action group called It's Easy Being Green. Not sure if you're familiar with it, but anyway, it's Easy Being Green. They ask, while momentum is growing for composting, there are still many buildings and residents which do not participate. Only mandatory composting will create the level of composting which makes it cost effective. What is your timeline for mandatory composting? Is there a timeline?
So we just announced the largest expansion of curbside composting in New York City, and which will result in New York City being home to the largest curbside composting program in the country. We're starting in the borough of Queens, and the reason we're starting in the borough of Queens, right, or there are a few, but among them, Queens produces the most yard and leaf waste in the city. And what we've seen with other cities who've started composting programs is oftentimes the food and yard waste, the yard and leaf waste, because it's no drama. It's already separated. It's not in your kitchen. You don't have to save anything extra. That leads the tonnage. And so we're starting in Queens the week of October 3rd. No signups, nothing. Our trucks are going to roll to every address in Queens once a week on their recycling day. You can use the brown bin. You don't have to use the brown bin. You can use your own bin. If it's just leaf and yard waste, you can leave it on the curb. I mean, we're trying to make this really easy breezy so that it's not an extra burden on New Yorkers. So the Queens residents look at it as an extra service that the department is providing. I think it would be crazy to go straight to mandatory right now on organics, because the vast majority of New Yorkers have never had access to a curbside composting program. So to immediately say, hey, you've never had access to it, but we're starting, next month and it's mandatory, I think that's too far. You got to let New Yorkers develop muscle memory. One of the big investments that we're making now in organics is around rolling out organic separation in every public school in the city. And that will be done not this school year, but by the end of next school year. There's a lot of schools to do it at. We're doing several hundred schools this year. And what we've seen is that when the kids develop that muscle memory, first of all, they're the New Yorkers of the future, but also they go home and they say to their parents, hey, we do this in school in the lunchroom. Why aren't we doing this at home? And so we're trying to make smart, tailored investments in organics processing in the city. And I also do not agree with the premise, and this is the last thing I'll say on organics, I do not agree with the premise that the only way to make organics collection cost effective is to have it be mandatory. I don't think we have the data yet to show that. And the reason I say that is because prior organics programs in New York City were very expensive. Their routes weren't done well. There was no fleet management. There was no workforce management. The whole thing was done on overtime. The program we rolled out in Queens, because we found so many of these efficiencies, there was so much like low-hanging fruit, is half the cost of prior organics programs. So give us a few months, let us collect several months of data on this new Queens rollout with the new cost model. Let's see how we do before we jump straight to a discussion of mandatory, because I think this is a thing that's best done, at least certainly in its first instance, not as a mandatory.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have about 50 people at the moment on YouTube. Let's get Dee to share with us a couple of questions that they are posing for you, please. Dee?
Thank you, Commissioner.
Dee, are you able to share with us a couple of questions now from YouTube? You're on mute. You are muted. Dee, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Okay,
Okay, Dee, we got you. Go ahead, Dee.
I don't think I'm on mute now. Can you hear me?
You're good. You got you. We got you.
Sorry. Congratulations. Okay.
You're good. You got you.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations on your position, and we all thank you for thinking out of the box on some of these issues. Okay, thank you. Congratulations on your position. So the first
You need
The
to kill
first
your
question
YouTube
is,
audio. You need to kill your YouTube.
about businesses and holding them accountable. Does the sanitation have the ability?
Kill your YouTube audio.
Just a second, guys. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, you're good. Please.
Sorry. Okay, so some questions on the YouTube channel were about businesses being held accountable. And does sanitation have the ability to give tickets to do that? Also, empty stores, who's responsible for policing the area outside empty stores and under scaffolding? So that's the first question.
Okay. I don't know if you can hear this. There's a full-on drum show outside my window. Empty stores, scaffolding. What was the first one?
Empty stores and
Or
scaffolding.
right before empty stores, there was another one.
The store's responsibility for cleaning
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
and how you're going to handle
yes,
that.
the sanitation department does have an enforcement branch. We have two types of workers who do enforcement. We have our sanitation police, who are police officers assigned to the sanitation department, and then we also have a civilian enforcement group. Citywide, it's only several hundred people who do enforcement in the department, and so the resources are, there's not hundreds of people in any one neighborhood. We do enforce all of the sanitation rules around trash and recycling and cleaning through our sanitation enforcement unit. Also, our supervisors assigned to every single garage do serve enforcement functions as well, which is very important because they are permanently assigned to those communities. They know where the problem areas are. Empty stores, it's the property owner is responsible for it, but I agree with you that when there are empty storefronts, those tend to be the dirtiest places because they are rarely ever cleaned. So I hope that answered your question.
You have another question, Dee, that you want to share from YouTube? Who's that from?
I do. So a lot of Upper West Siders are very serious about recycling. And so the question is, where does the sorted recycling actually go once it's collected? How can we feel assured that what we're doing is actually being followed through?
Yeah, it is in New York City. I'll tell you where it goes. We have two streams for recycling in New York City. We have metal, glass, and plastic as one stream. It's all consolidated together. And then, as you know, we have paper. All the metal, glass, and plastic goes to our partner. It's a partner called Sims. It's called SMR. They have a big facility in Brooklyn. And they take all of the metal, glass, and plastic, and they process it on site. They have one in Brooklyn and one in Jersey City. And so at those two facilities, that's where 100% of the metal, glass, and plastic goes. They put it through their process. They create bales of different types of materials, and then those bales are sold on the commodity market. Because we dual stream rather than single stream in New York City, we have much less contamination in our recycling than other cities have. And so our commodities that come out of our recycling plants do not ever go to landfill. They are all sold on resold on the commodity market. The paper, similar. It goes to a different partner, it doesn't go to SMR, it goes to a company called Pratt. They have a facility on Staten Island, and they process all of the paper in New York City. If they don't have capacity in their New York City-based facility, they have other facilities in the region where it gets sent to, but 100% of what goes in there is then resold. And actually, it's part of the way we fund our curbside recycling program in New York City is by selling the goods on commodities market. So I can give you confidence and assurance that what goes in does not go to landfill. The problem that we have in New York City around recycling is a very different one, which is that we don't collect enough to begin with. So our diversion rates are very low. We do great with the stuff that we divert, but the stuff that never makes it into the recycling bag, that goes in the trash instead, it's about 50% of recyclable material. I'm not talking about organics, but about 50% of things that could be recycled aren't recycled in New York City. And so what we really need to work on in New York City is increasing our capture rate.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Dee, please share more with us.
We have another question from Alexis Offen. She's a little disappointed that it's after 7 and we haven't talked about rat infestation on the Upper West Side, which is a big issue. So maybe you'd like to say a few things about that.
I would. I'd say two quick things about it, and thank you for raising it. First is, I think what I set out earlier about the change in set out times will make a meaningful difference in rats in New York City. I mean, it is crazy and unheard of. The trash is allowed to sit out on the street for 14 hours a day. Again, serving as all you can eat buffet for rats. Most other cities don't do that. It's wild. And that's something that has to change. And I'm working on changing it. Understanding that is also a big change for all 9 million New Yorkers. You want to do it once, you want to do it thoughtfully, and you want to do it right. The other big strategy that we're pursuing around rats, as I was mentioning to Neil before, is we are deeply looking at the prospect of containerizing our trash in New York City. I mean, most European cities don't put their trash on the curb. They put it in containers that are rat proof. And so I think containerization of our waste will also be an important rat mitigation strategy. So I would answer with those two big things. One more immediate, the set out times and compressing the time the bags spent on the curb, and then longer term, the citywide containerization strategy, which is much more complicated.
I have one more question, and
Just 1 second. I just want to follow up with that because what you're saying, Commissioner, a reporter from the West Side Rag, Ed Hirsch, is reporting on our forum today, and one of the things he wanted to ask about is there some new rule? You mentioned this earlier about when the trash can go out, when it can't go out. Is that now a new rule? Because some buildings have staff, some buildings don't have staff. Yeah. Can you give us clarity on what the new rules are?
So there has not been a new rule that has been promulgated, but as I was mentioning before, it's an area that we are looking at and thinking. There are 9 million New Yorkers. A change in set out times would affect all 9 million New Yorkers. And there are a lot of different groups to talk with and work with and stakeholders who have important things to say. And so what we've been doing over the past several months is meeting with all of them. Maybe not all of them, but meeting with a lot of them. So before we put forward any rule, we have the feedback of a bunch of different voices, a bunch of different stakeholders involved in waste management in the city, among them the building workers, who are a very important stakeholder in the process. So to answer the question, no rule has been put forward. We are in conversation followed.
Thank you. Dee, did you have one more from one of our YouTube viewers?
I do. I don't remember exactly who put this forward, but I just have a concern about, I mean, we banned plastic bags in New York, but the garbage bags that we're still using, are those not plastic? And are there any options?
A lot of people talk about different types of trash bags, rat-proof trash bags, whatever. I would say that the actual bags are a place where there has probably not been enough innovation. That is not something that is unique to New York City. That is something that is worldwide. Would I welcome innovation in the materials used in trash bags? Absolutely. I don't see it as a short or near-term prospect.
Let's move on. Liz, more questions, please, that have been submitted on different.
Yeah, I'm trying
different
to, I'm
topics.
looking for, exactly, I'm looking for a different topic. Maybe this one, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner, you might want to, might be a little bit different. Basically, there were quite a few people sent in questions about all of these sanitation issues as they apply to the parks. Riverside Park in particular, but the trash spillage, the rats, the lack of compliance of picking up dog poop, all these issues as they apply to the park.
Yeah, I would be happy to pass any commentary or feedback over to our colleagues in the Parks Department. The Parks Department does, litter service, litter basket. They're in charge of the cleanliness of parks land, but I don't want this to be a game of, I have to bureaucratically navigate which agency to ask. If you send those questions and that feedback over to us, I will be sure to get it to my colleagues in the parks.
Oh, so sanitation in the park is handled by the parks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just jump in here? One thing, I know it's a dirty topic, but there's dog poop all over the Upper West Side, and it is disgusting. And why, how, what are we going to do to change that situation?
I mean, people have to clean up after their dogs. It is absolutely unacceptable. We enforce it, but again, with a department of 7,000 sanitation workers and 10,000 people total, you're not going to catch every single person who doesn't clean up after their dogs. This is a place where, the enforcement that we can do and that we do, I think is important. People just need to have basic decency and clean up after their pets.
I have a
I
follow-up
don't really
to
have a
that.
better answer than that.
Well, Commissioner, I have a follow-up to that. Does your department have, say, a communications budget where you could do more PSAs to maybe do, collective behavioral change communications?
Yeah, we are. It's something I'm really interested in doing. We actually have a very, very strong public information and communications team. I don't know if you follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, but we've really found very creative ways to talk to people about these issues, and it's something that we're committed to doing more of.
So mostly social media communications?
Well, we have social media communications. We have mailers that go out, several citywide mailers that we do each year. We've invested recently of late in community and ethnic media. And so, yes, communications, I agree, is an area where we are focusing, where you'll see definitely more out of the sanitation.
Well, we have a newsletter, and which the audience is growing. If you want to, I'll start following and make sure I include your stuff in our newsletter.
Good, please do. I have about 5 more minutes.
So let me ask you this, Commissioner. You talked about the responsibility of businesses being, what is it, an 18 inches issue? What about the hundreds of tree beds throughout the Upper West Side that have become places for debris? When there are overflowing garbage cans, or not a garbage can closer, or a careless New Yorker or visitor, who is responsible for the cleaning of tree beds, which is not 18 inches from a retailer or a property owner?
Well, it's really, the Parks Department manages all things associated with trees, but we spend a lot of our time and energy cleaning grassy areas and tree beds, because that's where so much of the litter ends up. Sanitation department does play, I think, a very important role in addressing it, but trees happen to be something that's managed by the Parks Department.
Okay. Dee, do you have a question from a YouTube viewer that they'd like an answer from sanitation department? Liz, you want to pop in while Dee finds the best one on a different topic?
You earlier talked about 311, and there were quite a few messages about dealing with 311 and feeling basically the complaint is an overall lack of response. So I don't know if that's under your purview or what you might have to say about that.
If it's a sanitation related issue and New Yorkers feel a lack of response, that is definitely in my purview, and definitely something that I will look to address, because I feel that New Yorkers take the time to at least to submit an issue to 311. If they call it in or open up the app, then they deserve a timely response. That's why we have service level agreements. And so one of the things that I will look at and follow up with this group on is how often we are reaching or we are meeting our service level agreement when it comes to M7.
Okay. When you get the set of questions from us, you can read the details about those particular from those people.
Commissioner, let me ask you this, Commissioner. What is the role, what could be the role of block associations and community groups in becoming part of the solution, in joining in, as opposed to just a group initiates one thing or another group does another, or a block association? Is there a way to begin some effort or organize a way that block associations and community groups can really be coordinated as contributors, as players in the effort? Because as this forum and the response to it shows, these are issues that matter a great deal to many people on the Upper West Side. And we may be big talkers, but we also know how to clean. Plenty of us can learn how to clean. So how can we be part of making our city cleaner and a nicer place for all of us?
Yeah, I think I am a big believer in coordinated efforts. I think a bunch of different groups doing their own thing can have an impact, but a bunch of different groups and a bunch of different people doing things in a coordinated way will make a bigger dent. And in the few months I've been here, I have, one of the big takeaways has been there are so many different stakeholders in sanitation beyond the sanitation department. And I think what would be more effective is if there were better coordination among them. That is a leadership role that I think the sanitation department can and should and is positioned to take on, which is why one of the things we're doing now with sanitation is a complete restructuring and rethinking of how we handle and manage community affairs, both how we take complaints in, our responses to 311, and our coordination with community groups. And I think it's a huge opportunity to make a real big dent when we can coordinate among community groups and block associations.
So, like, do you work with One Block Upper West Side and Trash Heroes New York?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the specific names, but we work with hundreds, if not thousands, of community groups and block associations across the city. What I'm talking about is within each neighborhood, there are many different groups, and if we can coordinate
Yeah.
those groups and the work of the sanitation department, the neighborhood will benefit more from it. I am so sorry, I have a hard stop right now, but I want to thank you so much for having me today, for what I thought was very informative questions, and I look forward to responding to all of them and getting them back to you, and also look forward to future conversations with this group. I really do appreciate all of your time and your care about this topic. I hope it's clear that I really care very deeply about it too, and I'm looking for ways to make things better because I understand the problem.
I think we appreciate your dedication and appreciate your willingness to come speak with us. And we will let you go, but we might keep the deputy chief a little while longer and see what we can squeeze out of him. So we can.
All right, I think it would be great if we can end the session, and we will follow up on anything else with written answers. Neil, thank you so much for having me, and I'm just so fortunate to have run into you that night.
Pleasure. I'm glad you took up the opportunity. It's been a very interesting, informative, and I think helpful dialogue.
Great. All right, everyone. Be well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, Steve.
Don't forget to check out the website, upperwestsidecoalition.org. Email us at upperwestsidecoalition@gmail.com.
All right.
Check out our newsletter. Thanks, everybody.